Okay, in this video we'll have a closer look at how to carefully and accurately annotate your datasets such that they are best suited for processing by neural networks, or rather for creating training datasets to generate models that are accurate at segmenting the thing that you want them to segment. So I'll import a dataset that I've previously worked on, and as you can see, can you actually see that? Yes. As you can see, it already contains some annotations. In this case, yellow is the carbon film, turquoise is the membrane, and in pink you have the antibody platforms. We can also see some white boxes, which is a feature that I've called not antibody platforms, where I've picked other stuff to prepare negative samples for the antibody platforms model. So browsing through this dataset, you can see that I've annotated quite a number of slices already, but there are some more to go. So let's use this one where we can see some platforms, zooming in, and membrane and carbon as well. And first of all, let's annotate the membrane. Or actually, let's go for the antibody platforms because that one is a bit more, bit trickier. So we can add a filter as well, Gaussian blur, to make things a bit clearer to the human eye, like that. And let's see. So this stuff over here is typically what an antibody platform looks like, and so that's what we would want to annotate. And then setting a box over here, for instance, using by holding Shift and clicking, would seem nice, but then the problem is that over here there is also an antibody platform, probably. Of course, we never really know, but usually that's an antibody platform. So if we were to use this training box, then we'd be telling the neural network that this thing over here is an antibody platform and should be picked up, but this thing over here isn't, and that makes the training dataset ambiguous. So the first thing to keep in mind is that wherever you place a box, that image that is within the box should be properly annotated. So this one over here, let's pick it as well. And now there aren't any other antibody platform structures in that box. A second thing is that if you were to annotate, say, these ones as well, place another box, stuff over here, and this stuff, and then for each one you annotate, you place a box with the feature of interest in the middle, you run the risk of telling the neural network that antibody platforms are always positioned in the middle of a box, in which case it won't be able to, say, pick up this one if a crop like that would end up in the processing step. So what I always also do is pick sort of offside. So here we've added, let's see, we're now on slice 205, so we've added 15 boxes to the previous list of some boxes. So let's go into another slice over here, for instance, and you can see that I've added some offside boxes here as well. And maybe I've actually missed a bit, but I'm not sure if that's an antibody platform, so let's leave it at. Then let's have a look at the membrane. There's only one slice annotated here, which is actually a good example of what you shouldn't do, because now what we're teaching the neural network is, let's hide these other ones, is that this is what membrane looks like, which also means that this, which is also membrane, isn't what membrane looks like if we were to have picked negative boxes there. Or in other words, we're only looking at well-defined or in-focus membranes. So we can improve that model a little bit by picking some membranes that are slightly less well-defined, for instance over here. So I'll annotate that and probably fast forward through it in the actual video. But before I do that, another good point to make is that here there is something that looks like a membrane, and it is actually one indeed, but there's also stuff on top of it. In this case, fab domains from the antibody platforms. And we shouldn't include those in the training dataset. Or actually we should, but we shouldn't segment them or annotate them. So over here the membrane would be just this bit, and actually not the stuff in between, because that's a gap between two adjacent membranes. And what we shouldn't do is annotate this section, which does look like membrane, but since we know that these are actually the fab domains, it's not part of the dataset. Okay, so I've segmented the rest of the membranes in this slice, and now it's time to add boxes, and again I'm placing some of them sort of off-site, and others just with the membranes in the middle so that they contain a lot of membrane within one image. And it's fine if the boxes overlap a little bit, or a lot, usually. Right, then another thing, the carbon one over here has 0 boxes, which it shouldn't, so let's add some boxes. And we've got the same problem for this one as we had for the membrane, which is that in this slice all the carbon is very well defined and the edges are very clear. So these bright edges are typically what carbon looks like, and it looks a little bit like membrane, especially when it's not so well defined. I'll add a couple extra boxes before going on to the next slide. So over here, for instance, this edge, or maybe these edges, might be confused for membrane if you don't properly include unannotated membrane images as negative samples for the model to train on, and positively annotated carbon images as positive samples to train on. Or in other words, do annotate the carbon as carbon, but don't annotate the membrane as membrane, but do pick it. And you can do so by making a feature called not carbon and then picking the membrane images for that one, but you can just as well use the carbon dataset and include unlabeled images like this. But then what you shouldn't do, and what I just did over here, is pick boxes with carbon in them that is not annotated. So that's something that we have to fix. So, and we're not thoroughly annotating the carbon in this slice, but that doesn't matter as long as we've annotated within the boxes that we use for training. Over here it gets a bit vague to define what is or isn't carbon, but as long as you come up with some way of doing it and you are consistent in applying that way that you decided to annotate it, then it will be fine. So, done. Then let's pick some extra background images that will be shared between all the different models, so they'll all have just background noise essentially in their negative samples. And with that, I think I'll end the video here, and then in the next one we'll look at setting up model